my devotions this morning were out of Job. And for some reason, I'm stuck on the subject of what we do in suffering. That must mean that somebody out there needs some encouragement and some instruction on the subject. I never get stuck on any given subject like this where there's not a need. And I have to tell you, there was a time in my life where I would read Job, and I'm guilty of saying, oh, don't give me Job. Don't tell me about Job. Don't tell me about that. Now, having taken a few spiritual beatings from life's highway, I look to every single verse in the Bible for encouragement, for strength, for direction. So it should come as no surprise that, as I said, I began praying this morning, and in my devotions began in Job and began reflecting on the successive waves of suffering he incurred. Now his family is gone, his possessions are gone, and when it just seems it couldn't get any worse, he's covered from head to toe with this terrible condition, and the only relief he can get is finding a piece of broken potsherd and scratching himself with it in dust and ashes. And it's kind of there that I pick up, maybe that's an exaggeration for some of us. Maybe we haven't incurred that, but I don't know that I would survive and be stayed as focused as Job wants. And so I began in Job in the beginning chapters and verses, but I ended up in Job 23. And this is Job's reply, and I focused on 3 verses, but I'll say this is obviously, there's an exchange that goes on. That begins in chapter 22. It's Eliphaz begins railing and accusing Job, and this is his reply. He says, "Even today is my complaint bitter. My stroke, my hand is heavier than my groaning." Now I want you to listen to this. Remember, this is the same man that said, are we supposed to curse God? I mean, you came into this world naked, you'll leave the same way. The Lord giveth, he taketh away. He says, oh, that I knew where I might find him, that I might come even to his seat. I would order my cause before him and fill my mouth with arguments. I'd reason with God. We've all done that. I would know the words which he would answer me and understand what he would say unto me. Will he plead against me with his great power? No, but he would put strength in me. There the righteous might dispute with him. So should I be delivered forever from my judge. And these are the 3 verses that I stayed stuck on. Behold, I go forward, but he is not there, and backward, but I cannot perceive him. And on the left hand, where he doth work, but I cannot behold him. He hideth himself on the right hand, that I cannot see him. But he knoweth the way that I take. When he hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold. Now, first thing I did, I always am very suspicious of some of the translations, so I went to, this is my chicken scratch of the Hebrew that I penned out for myself, but I went to the Hebrew to see what on earth is being said. So King James, I don't know why they did this, maybe it just made more sense, but I'll read you the NIV, which actually captured the Hebrew much closer. These 3 verses should read like this. But if I go to the east, he is not there. If I go to the west, I do not find him. When he is at work in the north, I do not see him. When he turns to the south, I catch no glimpse of him. but he knows the way that I take. When he has tested me, and that's, the King James is okay, he hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold. So you see, in Job's answer and defense to his friend, he is essentially saying he's looked everywhere for God and can't find him. And I don't want you to be too quick to rush to judgment and say, well, that's ridiculous, because I believe every single one of us has done this at least once in our life. I'll paint a picture for you, and you'll know how silly it looks, but we've all done this. You've been out in public somewhere where you've seen a young child wander off, maybe just a few feet from the parent. The parent's just right over there, within eyeshot, but the child can't see and begins to cry, thinking the parents left them and they can't see them, and they begin to, first they panic, and then they begin to cry, and they can't be quieted because they can't see where mom or dad is, but mom or dad are just over there. And many times we do that. We feel like we can't even sense God's presence. And like that child, we begin to either mope or complain or cry or grumble and even ask God, are you even there? Even though just more than the parent who's within eyeshot, God the Father is still watching. Then when you come back to your sanity and the clarity comes, you go, wow, that was really dumb of me to think that God turned his back even for a minute. But we've all done that. We've all done that. So I captured this imagery where he says, to the east, and he's not there, and to the west, I don't find him. And when he's at his work in the north, great poetry of this all, I don't see him. And I thought this was kind of ironic. He turns to the south, I catch no glimpse of him. Our desire in a time of trouble, then hear me out, and please don't misunderstand what I'm going to say, is to be comforted. But most of the time in our trouble, our first instinct is to go to our friends and our family and lean on them and talk to them. It's much easier to talk to a person who's right in front of you, who even if they're not interested can be nodding their head and saying, yeah, or pass you the Kleenex box or say, that's good. Job's desire in his, even in this moment of turmoil, is to seek God. Now, God is not lost. And I hate when people say, when I found the Lord, as if to say God's been lost somewhere. God's out in the forest and he lost his way for about 20 years, but when I found him, but you understand the poetry of me saying, Job, in his time of trouble, was searching desperately. And in fact, if you go back to that verse 3, where it says, oh, that I knew where I might find him, that reveals Job's heart desperately, because he felt as though in his condition, in his circumstance, God had to have abandoned him. And I'm telling you, I'm on this for a reason, and it makes perfect sense to me. There are people, even as well-taught, some of you are so well-taught, you'll say, just don't give me Job. Give me any other part of the Bible. Just don't tell me that, because this is a book that tells of a man who suffered, and seemingly for no reason, and had friends who were really enemies, and was really put through the ropes. Hope you see yourself there. I certainly see myself here. His distress, he's searching everywhere, and he can't find God. He can find no consolation or comfort. You know, there's a passage out of Isaiah, truly, thou art a God that hidest thyself. So Job's not alone in his mindset to think that God has hidden himself, or he's taken himself or removed himself. Even David, in his psalm of great crying out to God for forgiveness, says, don't remove your spirit from me. So there's much here in common with these great people of God, all wanting to find the communion, to find the way back, because it's established for me as I read this, and I know this book pretty well, spent a lot of time in it. It seems pretty clear to me that as long as the man of God could have the assurance that his God was with him, no matter what calamities had happened, he was okay. He could lose everything else, which he did in this case. But if he lost God or the presence, his life was over. So you can really get a glimpse of this. The next thing that I remarked about this is in his searching. And it seems like such a strange thing. David in Psalm 139, he understood it a little bit better when he said God basically knew where he was in his down-sittings and his uprisings, even his thoughts that were afar off. He didn't paint the picture of a man searching or looking. He understood God knew right where he was, including even if he made his bed in hell. He says, "Thou art with me." So I kind of get comfort from this because I've had these moments of spiritual insanity where somehow everything's going wrong and the panic button is hit and I'm looking right here at myself and I see it seems a little silly. And then, of course, his final declaration here, which is the encouragement. I've given you the dark portion, but the encouragement. But he knows the way that I take. And I find that absolutely remarkable because how many times, and I speak for myself, have I thought, I wonder what God would think if. I don't need to think that. He already knows. He knows the ways that I take when I've taken the wrong turns even. When whatever it is, he knows all about me. I love that song, Surely He Knows All About Me. He knows the way that I take. Many folks think that through the course of their life and their deviations and when the stuff hits the fan, God must have not been directing my feet, my steps. The Scripture is abundantly clear. If we'll set our heart desiring Him, He'll pave the way. He just didn't say how He was going to pave it. He didn't say He was going to make it smooth. He didn't say He was going to make it a pearly staircase, so perfectly polished that steps outline. Just you commit your way. The Lord begins to work. Well, what about Job? That's a pretty bad way to start. He probably committed his way, was a righteous man, even made offerings for his children in case they sinned, and yet this still happened. The rain falls on the just and the unjust alike. God's sovereignty is at work. When He hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold. Now, I read out of Peter last night, 1 Peter, that the trial of your faith being much more precious than gold. But I began to reflect on this passage. When He hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold. And anything that's gold usually is shiny. But more importantly, it reflects light. So when you and I come out of our troubles and come back to our sanity, and when we come through, and we will come through, we'll come through just like Him. As He declares, I shall come forth as gold. That means I will come forth out of the darkness reflecting God's light. I love this because it's not only a poetic statement, but it's a promise for me that when God's done testing and seeing what's inside of me, I'm going to come out reflecting His light. And the darkness that I walked in, even momentarily, I won't even remember it. For the greater light that has shined just like gold, not because I shine, because He shined His light on me. Gold that reflects, gold that is brilliant, the color of eternity. Everything that I can think of here tells me what a comfort just in these words. I know that it's easy to say, and while somebody's going through what they think is the biggest test of their life, oh, you'll come through all right. You keep faithing, you'll come through. And God's going to say, see that? Now, God and the angels looking down, see that? And she thought that was the biggest test of her life. I was surprised because I got a couple more coming down the chute. She made it through that one with flying colors and still had lots of strength, and she trusted me, and she came out stronger on the other side. That means the next test coming down the pipeline may be a little bit greater, just a little bit. When he hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold. Some of you who called in prayer requests last night, I told you keep faithing, keep claiming the promises. We have the promise, we'll not be ashamed, we'll not be confounded by trusting in his word. Now, if you're in this place right now today, there's a great promise out of Psalm 50 and verse 15. That is for us to call on him in the day of trouble. I want to make sure that I quote it right. Psalm 50 and verse 15, call upon me, that is, call upon God in the day of trouble, and I will deliver thee, and thou shalt glorify me. So if you're in the Job-like state today, there's your promise. He says, if you call upon me in the day of trouble, don't lean on the arm of the flesh, don't look to somebody else first, but call upon him. I will deliver thee, and thou shalt glorify me. And let me tell you something, Job had it right. You'll come forth like gold that's been tried. And the very dross that clung to you through your suffering and through your circumstance will be a thing of the past. And only the brilliance, God's light, will be what you will be looking at. And thou shalt glorify me. Don't doubt in the dark what God showed you in the light. Too many of us do this, and I speak and say I'm included in this. Too many of us. The troubles come, the expected and the unexpected. And it seems we just mentally zone out and forget what we're supposed to do. You're well trained and taught. You stay in the faith. And just like Job, I give credit to him because through that passage I just referenced, he might have started on a little glib, I'm looking here and I'm looking there, and where are you? Oh, that I might know where to find you. But he knew in his heart of hearts that God was there, because he would never have said, I know after he's tried me, I'll come forth as gold. If he really thought God had abandoned him, those words would have never fallen from his lips. I know after he's done working on me, trying me, testing me, purging me, I'll come forth as. That's not the declaration of a man who's not sure if God exists or if he's even around. That's the declaration of a man who says, I temporarily lost my sanity and couldn't find my help, but my God is my help in a time of trouble, and when he's done with me, helping me, he'll not only bring me through, but his light will radiate through me and I will glorify him. I'm asking you to do the same if you're in trouble or suffering. This is the place to camp out, God's word. I hope you're encouraged, because after I was done my devotions this morning, I said, you know what? I don't have anything to worry about. God's in control. God's here. He hasn't left me. The last word from Jesus Christ, lo, I'm with you to the end. So I take that promise, and on his word, I rest with peace and comfort and the knowledge of what I've just claimed with you. I hope it brings you comfort too. Get on the telephone.
Come into this house, magnify the Lord, lift up holy hands, our hearts in one accord, worship and bow down.